It is the morning of January 7, 2009. In Hyderabad, India, a man sits alone at a desk. 64 years old. Founder of one of the biggest technology companies in Asia. A company with over 53,000 employees. Clients like General Electric, Nestle, the United States government. A name that had become a symbol of Indian business success. On paper, he has everything. But this morning, he is not building anything. He is destroying it. He opens a blank page and begins to write a letter. Not to investors. Not to regulators. Not to the press. Not to lawyers preparing damage control. He is writing to his own board. And what he is about to write will erase 30 years of work in a single message. But here is what makes this moment almost impossible to understand. No one is chasing him yet. No whistleblower has spoken. No regulator has forced his hand. No investigation has cornered him. The system outside is still normal. Employees are logging in. Clients are waiting for reports. The company is still successful in the eyes of the world. But inside that room something has already broken. Because in that letter, he is about to admit something almost no founder ever admits while still in control. The profits were not real. The cash was not real. The company's financial life was a fabrication. Over $1 billion simply did not exist. And here is the part that should stop you. He is not being exposed. He is choosing to expose himself. Voluntarily. Before the collapse. Before the arrest. Before the world even knows anything is wrong. And by the time that letter is read, Satyam is already dead. Even if the world does not know it yet. The stock had not collapsed yet. Employees were still logging in. Clients were still waiting for reports. Nothing had broken yet in the outside world. But inside that one decision, everything had already ended. And there is something about that moment that does not sit right. Because most frauds do not end like this. They are exposed. They are dragged out. They collapse under pressure. But this one was stopped by the man who built it. And the question is not just what he did. The question is why someone would choose to end their own empire before anyone even forced them to.
I'm Nikki. This is Empire Deep Dive. Let's get into it.
To understand what happened in January 2009, you have to go back almost 4 decades to a small town called Bhimavaram in the state of Andhra Pradesh in southern India. It is the 1960s. India is still shaping itself after independence. Opportunities are limited. The path from a small town like this to global business leadership is not just difficult. It is almost invisible. There is no map for it. There is no one who has done it before in a way that shows you how. Ramalinga Raju grows up in this world. He is not from poverty. His family has agricultural land. There is stability. But stability is not enough for him. He is thinking about scale. About movement. About what exists beyond the limits of what he can see from where he is standing. He studies. He goes to university. He gets an MBA. And then he goes to Ohio. I want you to picture that journey for a moment. A young man from Bhimavaram, arriving in the American Midwest in the late 1970s to study business. The kind of place that does not announce itself as significant. But what he sees there changes everything. Not in a classroom. In the world around the classroom. He sees companies beginning to use technology in ways that require constant maintenance. Constant development. Constant support. He sees the infrastructure of what will eventually become the global technology services industry forming in real time. Systems that need to be built. Software that needs to be written. Work that is skilled and technical and Raju looks at that equation and he sees India with complete clarity. Not as a country catching up. As a country with an extraordinary asset that the world has not yet fully understood how to access. Millions of mathematically trained, English-speaking engineers, educated by one of the world's most demanding academic systems. available at a fraction of the cost of their American counterparts. The gap between what the world needed and what India could provide was not just visible to him. It was enormous. And enormous gaps. As Raju had understood since he was old enough to observe the world, are where the real opportunities live. He gets on a plane and flies home. Back to India, back to Hyderabad. With a conviction, he starts a company. He calls it Satyam. In Sanskrit, Satyam means truth. A name chosen deliberately. A value placed at the very center of everything he is about to build. The timing is almost perfect. The 1990s opened the global technology services boom. American and European companies begin outsourcing software development and systems work at scale. India becomes one of the main pipelines for that demand. Infosys, Wipro, TCS, and Satyam, growing inside the same wave, building toward the same horizon. Raju is not a technologist. He is a builder of relationships. He understands trust in boardrooms. He understands how to walk into a room in New York or London or Tokyo and make the people on the other side of the table feel that they are dealing with someone serious. Someone who will deliver. And crucially, he delivers. Satyam grows from a small Hyderabad operation into a global IT services company with clients like General Electric, Nestle, and the United States government. Offices across continents. Revenue rising year after year. Headcount expanding into tens of thousands. By the mid-2000s, Satyam is one of the 4 largest IT companies in India. It is listed on the New York Stock Exchange. It is a symbol of Indian global ambition made real. Raju is celebrated. Awards. Profiles. Industry stages. And then comes the moment that this story turns on. And I want to be honest about something. Nobody knows exactly when it happened. Not the investigators. Not the prosecutors. Not Raju himself in his own account. There is no single day where the decision was made to falsify the accounts. No meeting where a plan was drawn up. No conspiracy that began with full knowledge of where it would end. What there is a quarter. A specific quarter. And Raju has suggested it was in the early 2000s, though the precise timing remains debated. Not dramatically. Not catastrophically. Just slightly short of what had been communicated to the market. And the pressure in that moment is something most people have never experienced and cannot fully imagine from the outside. You have told the market you will deliver a certain number. And the number is close. It is almost there. But it is not quite there. And in that specific moment, in the privacy of the decision that only he has to make, Raju makes a choice. He adjusts. A small adjustment. A rounding. A recognition of revenue slightly earlier than it should have been recognized. Something small enough that it feels like a temporary bridge rather than a permanent decision. And here is the thing about that moment that I keep returning to. He probably believed it. He probably genuinely believed that the adjustment was temporary. That the real performance would catch up. That what he was doing was buying time rather than building a fiction. That belief. That specific, self-deceiving, completely human belief is the first step onto the tiger's back. Because in the moment, it does not feel like mounting a tiger. It feels like solving a problem. And somewhere in that quarter, Satyam's truth and Satyam's reported reality began to separate. Slowly. Almost invisibly. Until they were not the same thing at all. What makes the Satyam case difficult to forget is how ordinary the beginning looks. Not a master plan. Not a designed fraud from day one. Incremental decisions. Each one solving a short-term pressure point. Each one creating a slightly larger obligation next quarter. Raju would later describe it as a gap. A mismatch between reported performance and actual performance. A gap he believed would close once growth caught up. But growth never caught up. And something worse happened. Once numbers are reported publicly, they stop being internal. They become expectations. Contracts. Market value. Trust. And when expectations are built on something false, correcting it is no longer a correction. It is collapse. So the system continues. Quarter after quarter. Year after year. Until the gap crosses $1 billion. Over 7,000 fictitious bank accounts and fixed deposits. Inflated revenue. Ghost entries. A parallel financial reality existing inside a real company. And then the pressure becomes visible. December 2008. A final attempt is made. The Matas acquisition plan. A move intended to inject real value into the books by acquiring family-owned companies. Matas is Satyam spelled backwards. He tried to fix $1 billion gap by buying his own companies and naming them in reverse. The reaction is immediate. The market does not interpret it as strategy. It interprets it as panic. Satyam stock collapses by nearly 50% in a single day. That day matters. Because it removes the last illusion that the situation can still be managed quietly. From that point, there is no soft landing left. January 7, 2009. The same morning we began with. The same desk. The same quiet. Except now, you understand what brought him here. The letter is not long. But every line carries weight. He describes the gap. He describes the tiger. He describes being the only one who knew. And then comes the sentence that changes everything. He says he is prepared to subject himself to the laws of the land, and face the consequences. Prepared. Not escaping. Not negotiating. Not delaying. Prepared.
Trading in
Within
Satyam
hours,
is suspended
the
until
stock is
further notice.
suspended. This is the first external shock. The first moment where the outside world catches up with what was already decided inside that room. Within days, he is arrested. Within weeks, the board is dissolved. Investigations later uncover the scale. Fictitious balances. Inflated headcount. Ghost employees. A decade of manipulation. But the letter remains the turning point. Because it was not forced. It was delivered. 3 months later, in April 2009, Tech Mahindra acquires Satyam. The company is renamed Mahindra Satyam. What follows is not simple recovery. It is stabilization under pressure. Clients reassessing contracts. Employees uncertain. Systems audited while still running. And here is the key point often missed. The fraud was in the reporting layer. Not in the operational layer. The engineers were real. The work was real. The clients were real. You can fake cash on a balance sheet. You cannot fake 50,000 engineers who actually know how to deliver. So while trust collapsed at the financial level, execution continued at the operational level. Over time, the company stabilizes, merges, expands again, and eventually becomes part of a larger, functioning technology group. The company that Ramalinga Raju confessed to destroying is, in a different form, under a different name, still operating. I do not know what to do with that. I find it genuinely difficult to place. Because the story of Satyam is simultaneously a story of devastating fraud. And a story of genuine resilience. Both of those things are true. At the same time. So why confess at all? I have spent a long time, sitting with this question. And I want to be honest with you about something, before I try to answer it. I do not think there is a clean answer. The surface explanation is pressure. The failed acquisition. The collapsing market trust. The shrinking room to continue. The tiger, with nowhere left to run. All of that is true. But it does not fully explain why the confession came before full external exposure forced it. Because in most cases like this, people do not initiate collapse. They delay it. They negotiate it. They redirect it. Raju did not do any of that. He wrote directly to the board. And in that letter, he said something that the practical explanation cannot fully account for. He said, he was the only one who knew. That detail matters more than almost anything else in this story. Because in saying that, in drawing a clear and deliberate circle around himself, and placing the board members, the senior management, the auditors, the 53,000 employees, outside it, he was making a choice about how consequences would be distributed. He was not confessing to save himself. He was confessing in a way that specifically protected the people around him from the full weight of what he had done. I think Ramalinga Raju had reached a point where the maintenance of the fiction had become more unbearable than the consequences of ending it. Not because of fear of discovery, but because of something harder to name. The weight of a parallel reality. The daily cost of being the only person in the room, who knows that the room itself is built on something that does not exist. Every meeting, every board presentation, every client call, all of it conducted inside a version of Satyam, that he alone knew was not real. That kind of isolation. The specific, total, uncrossable isolation of being the sole carrier of $1 billion secret for a decade, does something to a person that I do not think any external pressure can fully replicate. And I think that is where the tiger metaphor comes from. Not from the fear of falling off. From the exhaustion of riding. He did not confess because the walls closed in. He confessed because he had been inside those walls for 10 years. And on the morning of January 7, 2009, he could not do it for one more day. That is not a legal explanation. It is a human one. And it is the only explanation that fully accounts for why the letter was written, the way it was written. Not defensively, not strategically, but with the specific clarity of a man who had finally decided to stop. Satyam is not just a fraud case. It is a compounding case. Small adjustments that never reset. Temporary decisions that become permanent structure. A gap that becomes too expensive to correct. It is also a systems case. Auditors, boards, regulators, all operating correctly on information that is already false. All performing the appearance of scrutiny while scrutinizing a fiction. And this should make you think carefully about how much weight you place on the fact that something has been audited, verified, certified, and approved. Because those systems depend on the fundamental honesty of the information they receive. When the information itself is false, the verification becomes theater. And it is also a psychological case. Because sustaining a false system requires more energy than creating it. At some point, the maintenance becomes heavier than the fear of exposure. That is where most people miss the real mechanism. Not in the creation of the lie, but in the cost of maintaining it. And that cost, the daily, accumulating, invisible cost of being the sole carrier of a reality that does not match the reported reality, is something that most of us will never experience at Raju's scale. But most of us know something about it. Most of us know what it costs to maintain a version of things that does not match the actual version. The gap between what you have said and what is true. Raju's tiger was $1 billion and a decade long. Most of ours are smaller. But the mechanism is the same. And understanding that mechanism, really understanding it, not as a cautionary tale about corporate governance but as an insight into how human beings carry the weight of maintained fictions, is worth more than any compliance training ever written. Because the question this story leaves you with is not about Ramalinga Raju. It is about the gap. Whatever gap you are carrying. However small. However manageable it still feels. The tiger does not get easier to ride with time. It gets heavier. This is Empire Deep Dive. There is always another layer.
That is it for today's layer. If this changed how you see the world, subscribe. I will see you in the next one.